All right, this might not look like much yet, but this is the beginnings of a really, I'm hoping, a really cool barbecue for the Dollhouse. Stay tuned and see how we got this far. All right, so the base for our grill is going to be, I'm using a toilet paper tube. You could use one of these, you could use part of a center from a roll of paper towels. Anything that is a tube shape is at around 4 inches long to start with, and is about 2 inches in diameter. And then I have 4 strips of printer paper. They're 11 inches long, or whatever the length, yeah, 8.5 by 11. 11 inches by 4 inches wide. I've got 4 pieces. So I cut 2 pieces of printer paper down to create this. I'm not going to do the whole thing on camera. I'm going to do part of it. I also have a bottle, a pretty much empty bottle of Mod Podge here. You want something to go inside this tube while we're coating it. We're going to cover it with the 4 layers of paper, the 4 strips, to make this a lot stronger, because as you can see, this is really soft. So any formula of Mod Podge that you've got, it doesn't matter, because we're going to paint this when we get all done. So I'm going to just coat the paper. Excuse the cat playing with the toy in the background. He's been sleeping for the last 2 hours. The minute I turned the camera on, he decided it was time to play with his ball with a bell in it. So this is a project I've been wanting to do for quite a while, and I'm kind of working out how I wanted to do it. And this kind of came to me the other day. So I'm just going to lay this on. Now, if you're not perfectly straight, like I'm off here, that's okay. We're going to cut our grill out of the center part of this. We're going to cut off these ends. We just want it, we want to cover it right now. Just make it as strong as we can. Roll it as tightly as you can, and let this coat dry. Once this is dried for a while, I'll come back and I'll do each of these strips one at a time, allowing the Mod Podge to dry in between, and keeping this bottle in. I wish my bottle fit a little tighter, but this is the closest I had to the right size. So I am going to let this dry, put those other 3 strips on. When they are dry, I'll come back and we'll go to our next step. All right, my Mod Podge has now dried. It actually took overnight for all that Mod Podge to dry, so be warned, it's going to take a while. Now I'm going to mark a cutting line. I made sure that this edge, I used my scissors and trimmed off any paper that was hanging off of this edge, and made that nice and straight and square. So I've got my ruler, and I've got a Bic Mark-It, which is like a Sharpie. And what I'm going to do is mark 3 inches from the end, and then I'm going to take this. I played around with an extra tube that I had done, and I found that the easiest way for me to do this was with my actual miter box and miter saw that I use when I'm cutting like wood for bigger projects. You don't have to have the line all the way around, just most of the way. Just make sure that you are going nice and straight. And I want mine 3 inches. You could vary this. You could make yours 2.5 if you want to have a little less space taken up. It's up to you. So now that I've gotten all the way, whoops, those don't quite match up, but I'll make them match up. I'm going to go cut this off. And when I get it cut off, I will also, reminds me, I also have this piece. This is out of, I believe, a roll of aluminum foil. It's a smaller, and it's a lot sturdier piece, and I'm going to cut it 1 inch long. Once I have both of these cut, I'll come back and we will go on to the next step. All right, this is all cut off now. And I just use my, like I said, I use my regular miter box, and I cut this one off an inch wide. We're gonna set that to the side. Now I've made a couple of marks on the edge. I found spots straight across, and I am going to line my little ruler up with the straightest edge of my roll and with those marks. This will give me a guide to cut. Now I am going to cut on this line with my scissors. Now this I'm going to set off to the side also for just a moment. I'm going to get out some glue and a surface to work on. The other thing I did off camera is I got a piece of white cotton fabric. This is just some white muslin. I'm going to cut off this slightly raw edge there, and this is cut 3 inches by about an inch. This is going to be our hinge. And I'm going to use a toothpick, which I've got laying right here. And I'm going to do some gluing. Now this is going to be covered in paper and painted before we are done, so it won't show. I like using fabric for a easy to make hinge in miniatures because it's pretty strong, it's very flexible, and it's inexpensive. Now kind of eyeball where halfway is and glue your fabric in here at the halfway point. And then we're going to let this glue set up. So let's get that a little straighter. We're going to let this glue set up before we try to add the other piece. All right, the glue is not completely dry, but it's dry enough that I can go on to the next step. I'm just going to do another band of glue here. Sorry for the background noise. The cat has chosen this moment to play. Now be sure that you give yourself a little bit of space so that you can open this. It doesn't need to be able to open really far, but you need to be able to open it at least that far. And we're going to let that glue dry now. And we're going to let the round circles completely dry. And when that happens, I'll be back and we can go on to the next step. All right, to create the ends of our grill, I have started out with 8 circles of cardstock. And this is some of that leftover white cardstock that I use for the Cricut projects. It's just a medium weight white cardstock. I've cut 8 circles that are just under 2 inches in diameter. I actually used the lid to a bottle of Tylenol to work as my pattern. Just find something round that's approximately the size of the end of your toilet paper tube. And then I'm going to glue these together in 2 stacks of 4, and I'm going to allow this glue to dry. Now, if you haven't watched my Cricut videos where I make things out of paper, this gets really strong. 4 layers makes for a really strong finished piece when they're glued together. I use white because I prefer to paint it rather than use colored cardstock. And even if I was using colored cardstock, I would, especially black, this grill will be black in the end. I would paint it black because paint is less apt to fade in my experience than the colored papers. So we are going to, I'll get the last one on and go 1 layer at a time, getting them lined up. once I get these glued together, I am going to put a weight on them and allow them to dry. And once they're dry, I'll come back and we will move on to the next step. So I'll see you then. All right, the glue is fairly well dry on these, and I have made a mark in approximately the middle of each one. And I'm going to cut them in half so that I have 4 half round pieces, and these will be the ends of our grill, the main body of the grill. So I have a piece of printer paper here, and I'm just going to glue these on a ways up from an edge and with space all the way around. You'll see why here in a little bit. This is how we're going to attach these to the grill. And I have more tacky glue over here to the side, and I know white on white is not fun, but that's unfortunately the reality here. Now leave yourself room on both sides and the bottom, because we're going to need tabs to put these on. And I think I'm going to, yeah, I think I can get 2 on each half. I kind of folded the paper in half. That way I could make sure I was getting this spaced out in such a way that I'd have space around each one. So I'm going to get the other 3, well, now the other 2 pieces glued down, and I'm going to let this glue dry a bit, and then I'll come back and I'll show you how to trim these. So I'll be right back. All right, my glue is partially dry, so what I'm going to do is trim this down a little bit. Now I managed to get those lined up fairly well. I'm going to fold it over and cut just a little more than twice the size there. You'll see why when we get to a couple of steps away from where we are right now. Now I'm going to cut each of these apart so that I'll be able to work with just one at a time. Now what this is going to allow me to do is, first off, I'm going to round these off. And I will wait until it's a little drier to attach it to the grill, but I want to get started here. I want to start trimming. And I'm going to do this. And now I'm going to make some little notches. This way, when we go to glue it onto the grill itself, we'll be able to and it doesn't have to be perfect. These little tabs are going to be covered up. I'll get that so it's folded over exactly on the top of that. All right, then the other step I'm going to take after I get all these little pieces I've cut, little notches I've cut out off of there, I'm going to fold this over and cut very similar tabs on the reverse side. I'll show you what we need to have when we get done. I've been kind of thinking about how to make this work and be able to be glued in so that our ends would stay where I wanted them. Because the edge of this paper, like this rim, this wouldn't be very much surface to glue in and have it be where it would stay. And I sometimes see people build things like this, and they do glue those really thin edges, and I'm always afraid it's going to fall apart. All right, so when we're done trimming these, we're going to have something that looks like this. So I'm going to trim the rest of these up so they look like this, and I'm going to make sure that they set aside till they are completely dry. When they're dry, I'll come back and we can start working on the next step. All right, the glue has dried on these enough that we can go ahead and work with them. So I'm going to take one of them, and this is the side that has the cardboard piece. Push those flaps up. I'm not going to deal with this side right now. I've got some glue. I'm going to put glue in two places. I'm going to put glue here on the inside edge. And then I'm going to turn it this way. And I'm going to run some glue in a band like that. Now this may require a little juggling to get it done. And I did beforehand check to make sure that the pieces that I cut, the half circles, would fit inside of there. I'm trying to keep that cardboard half circle, or the paper stock half circle that we made 4 layers. I'm trying to keep that even with the end of my tube. And that's all there is to it for this step. Now I'm going to let this dry, and then I'll go ahead and do the rest of these off camera so that you don't have to watch me do that the whole thing there. And then when I get all 4 of these onto this stage, I'll come back and we'll do the next step. All right, I have the other 3 ends all glued on, and I've went ahead and folded them and done the last step, which I'm going to show you on this one. So this is now set up. So I've got glue for here. I'm going to fold this back out of my way, coat the inside of that end with glue. And it's kind of hard to get the glue down on the bottom. So what I'm going to do, I'll show you in a second. I'm going to get this part done. Then these tabs that are at the that are going to go to the very bottom, I'm going to go ahead and glue those. And we are going to glue some paper over this, so it doesn't have to be glued perfectly. Just fold it in. And I find having something like a paintbrush handle really helps to get that down into the bottom. If you've got some pieces that are trying to stick up on the corner, just trim it back. And there you go. Now we have a grill. Our grill is started. It's going to be a little bit crooked there, but that's okay. I'll trim that up once everything is dry, and then we can put the next step. So I'm going to let this dry probably overnight. So I want that glue to be dry before I cover it with another piece of paper. When I come back, we will put a covering on and then put some pieces in to allow us to put a rack in next week. So I will be back when this is dry. All right, now that has all dried overnight. So now I've cut some pieces of paper, and I've cut 2 strips that are a little narrower. They are, let me see how wide I cut these, about 2 3/4 inches wide. They are going to cover this main surface inside. And then I've cut 2 pieces that are 4 inches wide, 3 inches wide, which is the width of my barbecue. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to do these ideally, I'll probably do these one at a time and let them kind of sit and dry. We'll see. And I'm back to the Mod Podge because I want to be able to spread it on the paper. Now I'm using 2 separate pieces on the inside and 2 separate pieces on the outside because I don't want to impede this hinge at the back. I don't want to put more bulk on the hinge because I want it to continue to work. And this will be easier for you guys because you won't be trying, as usual, you won't be trying to do this on camera. Now I'm going to trim this. And then I'm going to just try and remember to keep this under camera. Run that over the edge so it kind of finishes off the edge. I think I can, and then I'm going to trim that. It's all going to be painted matte black inside anyway, so there's not going to be a lot of this. It won't, if you aren't perfect, it's not really going to show that much. But we want to cover up most of it, so it is not as obvious. We made this out of a toilet paper roll. All right. Trying to keep track of all of this. It looks like it's going on fine with it all, with doing all of them at once, so you can probably do that. If you have the time to let it dry in between, you know, and you're more comfortable with that, go ahead and do that. Now we've got that. And it's okay if it doesn't match up perfectly. We are going to be, the bottom outside is actually going to get covered. That will probably happen next week. I don't think we're probably not going to get a lot further today. I know it doesn't look like much yet. I think I've got one more step after this, and then we're going to paint, and then we'll probably call it for the week. We'll see how long that takes me. And this is a little bit wider than my piece. I think I did cut it 4 inches instead of 3. That's okay. That means I can cut it to exactly the size I want it once it's dry. Okay, so this is cut 4 inches wide. That's right. That's what I was thinking I cut it 4. And don't worry about little wrinkles. We'll either disguise them later or they will go away in the meantime. All right, I'm going to put this piece on when this is all dry. And I'm lining up right up to the edge there, but I'm not covering my hinge because I don't want to cover the hinge. Like I said a minute ago, I want that to not be impeded. All right, I'm going to go wash my brush. I'm going to let this dry. And once this is dry, we'll come back, we'll trim it, and we will go on to the next step. I'll see you then. All right, my Mod Podge has had a chance to dry, so I'm just going to trim this back. I did 1/2 off camera just so I can make sure what scissors I wanted to use. I like long scissors when I've got a long piece to cut. Again, this doesn't have to be perfect. And then I like to use a smaller pair of scissors on these smaller areas. It's just easier. Now this is fairly dry, but there may be a few spots of Mod Podge that are damp, so I'm going to set it off to the side after I get it trimmed here. And we are going to do one more thing right this second. You remember this short piece. Now this is an optional part of your barbecue. This is going to be like the little smoker box on the side. And I've got just one of the scraps of this same paper. This is not going to open. This is going to be just look like it functions, but not actually open or anything. So, but I do want to cover the ends of it. Since it won't get a lot of wear and tear, I'm just going to use a single layer of paper on it. I'm going to let that glue dry. Then we'll trim it up and glue it on and finish this up. So I'm going to let that dry, let this dry, and then I'll be back. All right, this is fairly dry. So what I'm going to do is trim it back. Hopefully not too close to the tube. Then I'm going to cut some notches out of it, out of this part. And then it's simply a matter of kind of pulling out some of those little pieces. The reason you pull out these little, you take these little notches out is it makes the paper lay more flat. All right, toothpick, a little more tacky glue. And working a small area at a time, just fold these little tabs up. You might have to hold them. And I'm just going to go do this all the way around, get those little tabs folded up, and then I'm going to repeat the same thing on this end, so I'll have a better surface to glue to our grill when we get to that step. So I'm going to off camera just do this because this is going to be kind of boring, I realize. And when it's all dry, I'll come back and we'll go to the next step. All right, so this is now closed on both ends. That way we've got an end that will be finished to show on the barbecue, and also another end that we can use to glue onto our barbecue, because it would be really difficult if we didn't have this solid base there. Now I've cut a strip of printer paper again. This is the 11-inch length of the paper by 1 1/8 inch, because I wanted it to come all the way to the edges of my little drum here, my little piece. The same gloss Mod Podge that I've been using, because and I don't know if I talked about why I'm using gloss. It doesn't matter. Or this one's satin, I guess. This happens to be satin. I just grabbed the one that felt like it had the most in it, because we are going to paint over this, so the finish of the Mod Podge won't matter. But I had the largest amount. So now I've coated one side of that strip of paper. Try and get this on as straight as physically possible. And just roll this around. This will kind of cover up all those, you know, all the irregularities on our sides. And we can always do a little bit of trimming if we need to when we're all done, which it looks like I'm going to need to, but that's okay. I'm okay with that. And we'll just position it in such a way that the best looking side is facing the way we want it to. And I'm going to put a little more on the side just to make sure all my pieces stay down. Don't worry about wrinkles at this point. Most of those will go away as this dries. Any that remain, we will just hide. So I'm going to let that dry. I'm going to wash my brush. When that gets all dry, I'll come back and we'll go to the next step. All right, this glue has dried, so I'm going to take a pair of scissors and trim off any excess paper that's going past the end here. And if you want to, you could take a piece of like medium weight cardstock and cut a nice round circle and put on the end of this, if you would feel better about that. We will be adding some details to this probably next week. So that one's finished for right now. So now let's move to this. I have cut two. These are just plain craft sticks. They're the kind that come at the dollar store, so they're a little bit smaller. I'm going to decide which half of this is going to be my bottom. I think I'll do this one. I'm going to get some glue, and I'm going to eyeball this, but you want to do your best to get it on straight and the same distance from the top. This is going to be a little ledge that we will be resting our rack to put our food on top of. So I'm going to line it up like that. Kind of hold it, and I cut it just slightly shorter than the width of this so that it would fit nicely. And the idea is we won't really see this, and I need to hold on to it better. So I am going to hold this until it's dry. I'm going to glue this one onto, that'll stay for a little bit, I think. Glue this one right here. By the time we get this all painted, These are going to blend in, then we'll set our rack on top of it, and they'll just kind of blend into the grill. So I am going to, off camera, make sure these are straight, and I'm going to hold them until that glue holds on, and then I'll let it dry completely, and we'll come back and talk about how far we've gotten. All right, so this glue has dried overnight now, and this is set up really nicely. I am so excited to get moving on this. But this is as far as we're going to go this week. This is going to be a multi-part tutorial. I'm not sure at this point how many parts it's going to have because I'm just getting started. I have some ideas. We have detailing to do to these two pieces. We need to make a rack for our food to go onto. We will need to make the stand that this sits on, and I'm hoping to make a little shelf off to the side. There's just a lot to do yet. So I hope you enjoyed this part of the tutorial. Be sure and check the blog post. There should be photos and more details over there. If you enjoy my content and haven't subscribed, I encourage you to hit that subscription button and the notification bell so you know when I put up a new video. Thank you very much for watching today, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.